All right, well, let's move on now and talk about the topic on everyone's mind, the next big thing, and that is renewable energy or green energy. India has massive potential on that front. But let's talk about the on ground feasibility, the progress seen so far with big boys entering this field. How would it sort of amp up India's own share of renewable energy? Currently, of course, we still rely on fossil fuel in a big way. Let's take forward this conversation with Debasish Mishra, partner for energy resources and industrials leader with Deloitte India. Mr. Mishra, thank you so much for joining us this morning on The Market. So India, of course, has set a renewable energy target, a target for solar, target for wind, so on and so forth. My question is, how practical is it to reach these targets? And of course, to do that in a certain time frame. Not putting a time frame, of course, renders the entire exercise useless. So how feasible is it, given the on-ground challenges, given our own cycles of movement really that we have in India?
Good morning and thanks for having me over. No, India has done tremendously well in last 5 to 7 years in the area of renewable investment. In fact, most of the investment on the generation side, incremental investment that on the generation side, what is happening in the renewable only. And in 2014, we had 33, 34 gigawatt of renewable capacity. And as you would have seen a couple of weeks back, I think a week, 10 days back, we crossed 100 gigawatt of renewable capacity. And since you mentioned a measurable target, so India has set itself a target of 450 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 2030. And that's our commitment to the global community also. And given the fact that solar PV now comes at around 2 rupee 30 paisa on a regular basis. So it's come to a point where it's economical to do renewable as well. So we are very much on track, and it's India's movement in terms of achieving the energy independence, what Honorable Prime Minister mentioned last week.
But still, a big chunk of our energy requirement comes from fossil fuel. I think I was reading some data on the Ministry of Power website, and obviously 60 to 70% comes from coal-fueled energy. How soon do you think will we be able to shift a majority to, renewable energy?
That will take a few decades, and you are right that it's not even 60-65%. In fact, today the power sector, it depends almost 75% of its fuel from the coal side, and that's not going to go away in a hurry. But the point is that we are at a point of time where renewable plus storage will soon become a viable option for the utilities, and that if it comes below the round the clock power that we are getting from coal and other fossil fuel sources, that becomes a point where the transition will accelerate. So, it might take India time till 2050, 2060 to actually turn around the case where we are more dependent on renewable than fossil fuel. But then India has come to a stage where we can afford to say that we will not add any more fossil fuel based, sources of power. We can afford to do that, but for the time being, we will continue our dependence on fossil fuels such as coal and oil. Yeah.
Sure. Debashish, the other angle to moving to renewable energy is also the costs involved. Can India really afford this transition to renewable energy, or do you think we'll have to sort of invest with war footing?
So that's what I was in my opening statement. I was mentioning that India is very, nicely placed. We are between Tropic of Cancer and the Equator, and we have ample, solar potential. And solar, because of the PV prices, the photovoltaic panel prices have come down. In this particular reason, it comes at a price point of, let's say, 3 cents or around 2 rupee 20 paisa per unit of energy. So that per se has become much cheaper than what the grid can afford. But the point is the intermittency of this energy. This comes only during the daytime. It comes for 250 days in a year or 300 days in a year. That we will overcome if storage prices come down. Today, the storage prices are around $140. If that what is expected is in next 4-5 years, that will come to around $80-$90. And at that price point, round the clock power, so solar plus storage, will become utility scale, and it will come at a price point where even utilities will not prefer to go for coal-based power, and they will go for this kind of storage-based renewable power. So it's renewable is no longer a source of power as such. It needs subsidy. It can stand on its own, but the nature of power is intermittent. That's the only challenge that we have today. But soon, with technological advancement around storage, we will overcome that as well.
Sure. The other angle also is the kind of disruption that it brings with it, Debashish. For instance, for the auto sector, do you think the auto sector per se here in India is ready for this big transition? And, the entire multiplier effect that it has with, various components, commodity costs, and of course the overall cost which is involved to try and bear this disruption.
So, as we have been maintaining that the future of energy, the future of mobility is also going through a massive amount of transition. And from the current IC, the internal combustion engine, India is already in the middle of a transition to you would have seen the CNG, LNG kind of movement. And a lot of cities are now connected to the gas grid. So India's mobility transition will go through kind of a gas-based mobility also. But what we are expecting is, you're right, that by 2030 to 2035, we will have electric vehicle, we will have hydrogen-based fuel cells related mobility, and we will have this gas-based and the IC engine-based mobility. So that market itself will go through a lot of changes, and some of the changes in certain micro segments will happen much faster than other segments. Like, you would have seen a lot of two-wheeler EVs getting launched. And that's the segment where India, it's a very large market, and that gets converted to EV. And that adoption happens at the right price point, then that itself would change the way India is consuming diesel and petrol today. So the entire planning in terms of what you mentioned, in terms of the materials used, whether we want more refining capacity, all those planning and aspects of what the market would look like and how to cater to that has to be recalibrated going forward. So it's a massive amount of change that is happening. And all these segments, whether it's energy, mobility, they'll somewhere they are very much interconnected, and their changes are also dependent on each other.
Okay. Challenges, let's talk about that. From what I see, storage is a challenge, transportation of hydrogen based energy could be a challenge, and also renewable energy as a whole. We've seen bidding processes in India take a little while until they become clearer, more transparent, more fair. So all in all, if I have to summarize all of it, what are the challenges you see for moving towards a green hydrogen based energy implementation?
So you have already counted a few of them. The biggest challenge today, at least from the renewable and the sector is facing, is the financial health of the discoms. Many times, the central government has very ambitious plans around renewable, around green hydrogen, about all these new energy kind of things. But ultimately, a lot of the implementation will happen with the states, and many of the discoms, despite several attempts, their financials are not at the best of the conditions, given that the structure and the way there is a gap between tariff and what is the cost to serve and stuff like that. So that remains number one challenge. Second is, although India has gone up from 33 gigawatt to 100 gigawatt, most of the equipment in the solar and solar particularly, they are imported. So recognizing this, what the government has done is it has come out with the production linked incentive, the PLI schemes, and India is trying very aggressively to create that manufacturing ecosystem. And we miss probably, to great extent, the solar manufacturing part of it. But we are pretty well placed to take advantage of things like, giga factories for storage, or you mentioned green hydrogen, and related to that is basically the electrolyzers, the fuel cells. You would have seen some of the very large corporates have announced their manufacturing, plans around these segments. And these are at very nascent stage of development in the entire global scenario as well. So if India can latch on to that and India becomes really the manufacturing hub for storage, for electrolyzers, for fuel cells, that's a risk that we are currently carrying, but that will become an advantage, and India will become a net exporter of all this manufacturing stuff. So that I will say that it's a risk right now being import dependent, but if we can create that manufacturing ecosystem, and we have seen it in the past also, these are large corporates who have through scale and use of technology and capital deployed, they have really brought down the price point. So it's possible, and India is probably doing the right thing to make that happen in the next wave of adapting new energy.